This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about business issues, the Principal Broker Forum that happened earlier this month, and also a lot of dialogue on how to handle yourself when you are dealing with a listing broker who needs to be present for showings, when you're that person, and also when you're the buyer's agent and that person's not giving you any room for space to talk about things yourself with your clients. First thing, though, is to talk about something that hit the news yesterday. Pretty important information here. The future of River's Edge. I don't know if you have heard about this yet. It is one of those things. We have sold a lot of property in River's Edge, and it hit the news a couple of days ago. I got word from one of our brokers who has a client who was considering selling property in River's Edge. They had purchased recently I would say within the last couple of years from Polish. And now, if you haven't heard yet, the significance is that Polish is planning on purchasing the golf course. Wayne Purcell, it's the Purcell family that owned River's Edge, and they still own the golf course. They own the whole thing. They sold out the convention center and hotel a few years ago, but now they are retiring and selling off the golf course. And Polish, who has been building out there for quite some time in all the undeveloped lots and the undeveloped area around the golf course, is now looking to take the golf course, the top 9 holes, the back 9, and develop it into homes. And this has definitely a lot of ramifications for our clients, for people who live on the golf course. Polish, I think they were caught on a little bit unprepared when this first hit a couple of days ago. They had planned on rolling this information out later, but it hit the fan first, and now they are now trying to explain what's happening. And I don't know if you've seen this on their website all, but they're talking about what they're planning on doing. They're again saying how the golf course communities in the world, or in the United States at least, are in decline because not as many people are playing golf. There's a lot of cost involved with maintaining a golf course. We all know from a building perspective that when people plan on selling a golf course community, put the golf course in order to sell the lots around it, because they sell at a premium. People love that open area. They love the green space connected with the golf course. But the golf course itself is typically a money pit. And at the point in time when you have all the property sold out, all the development land, what do you do with the golf course? How do you maintain it? Which is one reason why a community such as Tethrow, when they started developing Tethrow, they made a requirement that everyone who buys in Tethrow has to be at least a social membership, have a social membership with Tethrow, if not a full golf membership. So that way they have plenty of money coming in to maintain the golf course. We know also a couple of years ago how Broken Top, in which the golf course was separate from the HOA and owned by a separate entity, the people who owned Broken Top elected to sell. They basically said that because they weren't making any money, they told the HOA that they are planning to start to develop portions of the golf course into lots. And of course, that made the owners at Broken Top step forward and decide as an HOA to purchase the golf club, the golf course, through a special assessment that everyone who lived in there had to pay. And now the HOA owns the golf course. And so that is protected, that community. Then there's, of course, the lawsuit that happened at Mountain High, in which the golf course was abandoned, and lawsuit and the settlement of that required that the back 9, which is where the homes were located, be brought back to life and be a golf course. But the owner of Mountain High was allowed to abandon the first 9, the front 9, which are located south of China Hat. And of course, Orion Greens is another place which was a 9-hole golf course, which now no longer exists as a golf course. So does anyone have any thoughts about this, how this is going to hit people going forward? Is this news to people, or if you guys have all kind of heard about it? Feel free to unmute your mic and let me know if you have any thoughts about it. Anyone have any thoughts about this? Or is this all news to you, or you guys have heard about it? Obviously, from our representation of people, we have to disclose this. This is really important information for people to be aware. It's, just, yeah. Anyone have a question about anything?
My thought of the matter, Linnea, was that I'm thinking that we're going to see this more and more, where the big builders are going to come in. And I know that they chatted to a gentleman who had recently refinanced and who lived out there, and he said if he'd have known that this was going to happen, he wouldn't have done it. He would have sold.
Yeah.
And obviously they're not going to be building affordable housing.
Yeah.
You know,
no.
so
yeah.
It's very frustrating.
Yeah, I know that Polish is saying they're going to do the middle housing that's missing. I'm not sure what is middle housing now and then with housing prices as high as they are. I think a lot of that will be dependent upon at the point of time when they're ready to start offering their product. Of course, that's not going to happen for a couple of years. This whole plan has to get through the city. I'm sure there's going to be an awful lot of owner pushback from the HOA. Who knows if there may be lawsuits. The fact that this wasn't disclosed to people who have purchased recently from Polish, especially those who purchased premium property on the golf course, probably paid additional money to be on the golf course. And Polish, of course, didn't disclose this. And personally, I don't know if they actually have to. If you think about the property disclosure statement, the seller of new construction is exempt from having to disclose things that are normal, things for resell, people who are selling resales to have to disclose. I'm not sure about all that. Any other thoughts about it? Anyone? I don't see anything right now. I know it's just going to be it's a big thing for us to have to handle. We have a number of properties right now that are in contract in River's Edge, and obviously we have to let the other side know about it. They don't know yet. Okay, if anyone doesn't have anything else.
Just single family residents or condos and townhomes, do we know?
Yeah, the initial plan that I saw first was it's 372 residences. There'll be a big conglomeration of townhomes. That's the area closest to Mount Washington. But the rest of it will be single family homes.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Thank
372 is the initial plan. Again, it's in rough, it's in early stages of approval, and they are also saying that it won't start happening till 2022. So if you see here on the River's Edge website here, or the Polish, River's Edge will operate normally through 2022 shoulder, but the plan may evolve in communication with neighbors, golf pass holders, and broader community. One of the things that they are saying with Polish is that because of this development, they'll be able to have more water go to the Deschutes River. I guess because they're thinking how much water is utilized in watering a golf course. They're also saying they're going to try to hope to put little open areas, also more access to the river trail and trails throughout that area to keep that going. I don't know. I mean, they're still in the early stage, and there's going to be an awful lot of things for both Polish and the homeowners to get through before this becomes reality. So curious.
I have a question, Linnea.
Yeah.
So I just had a closing in there last month, and then I have one that's pending in there. And then the one that closed, the agent reached out and asked if my clients had any idea that this was going on. And of course we said we had no idea. We were learning about it as everyone was. Could there potentially be something coming of that? Like, it's a little concerning.
Well, it is. I actually reached out yesterday to the legal hotline to try to get some clarity as far as how we disclose this, because again, our owners had no knowledge of this at all. The first bit of knowledge I got was one of our brokers who has a client who was thinking of listing, heard it on the news. It was going to be broadcast that night, and sent the link and it showed a copy of that map. Of course, the map is now gone, but the map that showed what the development was going to potentially look like.
Right.
And that's the first I heard of it. And then, of course, that was 2 days ago afternoon.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
So I spoke, yeah, and the one pending that I have, I did speak to the agent yesterday about it. And so far she said her client's okay. So it's like fingers crossed.
Yeah, I know both of those listings in there, properties we have in contract do not border the golf course. So I would think that's actually a good thing, because they did not have that, they don't have that open area behind them to sell as a, as an amenity of the property. Yeah, it's
Right.
something we're gonna have to work through. And as soon as I get word back from legal hotline, I'll let you guys all know about how we need to properly disclose this, since we had no knowledge at the point of time when our people signed their disclosure statements. I think going forward, having an amendment put together, an addendum put together in which we note this, but again, we don't know how it's all gonna shake up. We just don't know. It's all early stages, but it will definitely be impacting those people who live there. Anything further on this before we get going on the business issues?
Hey, Linnea, this is Tina.
Yeah, hi, Tina.
I know that Polish seems to be purchasing all kinds of land, a lot of Central Oregon irrigation land, like off of Brookswood, over there off of Ferguson by Sky Harbor. So it seems like they're just digging in anywhere that they can find land for homes at this time.
Yeah, they're becoming a very big builder in our area, that's for sure. I mean, not only here in Central Oregon, but they have projects in Portland and Washington and various other places. Yeah, they seem to have, I mean, they have a product that a lot of people love, and they're a very successful builder.
I guess if there's open space behind you, you better beware. It probably won't be.
Tina, years ago, I talked to a county planner because I got word that this pasture that was behind my house that I loved looking at every day had horses, running around in it. And I got word that they were going to develop it into housing. And I called the planner and I said, is there anything I can do to keep that pasture? And he said, nope. People who own the property have the right to do with it as they wish, as long as they're not breaking the law. Really, he said, the only way to protect a view or protect a property that you really like is to own it. So that's really true. It's also something to think about when we're representing people, that the only way to really protect a view, say a view for that matter, is you can't guarantee anything. We can't guarantee that that view of the mountains won't become obstructed as those trees grow. We can't guarantee that that golf course will always be there. We can say this is what it is right now. We can't guarantee even that the mountains will be there, because we could have a volcano erupt. There are things that happen, and so the reality is this is what it is at the present time. We try in our representation to disclose what we know for what we've heard of that will happen in the future, what's booked or what's potentially booked. So when I'm representing buyers, there's also something called due diligence for buyers. If they have questions, they need to go down to the county. They need to dig themselves into digging through county records or city records and talking to appropriate people so they can find out about anything that they have concerns about themselves. And we give them directions of who to speak with, but making sure that people have done their due diligence. And if it's of a concern to them, making sure they write that into the offer. So, okay, well, with that, let's go ahead and get going on our presentation for today. And so this was the Principal Broker Forum and Business Recap. And this was a really interesting thing. The Principal Broker Forum, OAR, tries to hold twice a year, both in the spring and in the fall. And it's geared mostly for principal brokers, but it's also such a really important tool for people to hear about concerns around the state, and also what it's kind of like an open, there's a topic and then people contribute to that topic. We happened to have online 146 participants. It was really very, very popular. And I would invite you all, if you have questions or thoughts as I go through this, please unmute your mic and contribute, because that's the whole nature of the forum. People, they raise a question, and then people say, hey, what about this? Or what about this? Or this is how we handle this in this part of the state. And it's really informative. So the first topic we talked about was multiple offers. And that's the big issue that we've been dealing with an awful lot in our market right now. So multiple offers. In particular, we talked about love letters, fair housing issues, escalation clauses, and proof that an offer was presented. And so we're going to tackle love letters first, because that's one of the things that I know for people who've been attending the local MLS meetings, people have talked about love letters. If you don't know what a love letter is, it's basically when you write an offer, it's including information about your buyer, saying how much your buyer is going to adore living in your home because of X, Y, and Z. It is an issue because if those love letters can be interpreted as a fair housing problem, say someone writes a letter saying that they envision their 3 children waking up Christmas morning to see that Christmas tree located right there in the living room, and running down the stairs or sliding down the banister to that living room to open their presents, looking out those windows as the snow falls. You know, of course, that touches at the heartstrings of the seller, who may have raised their home family in that home, and they love the thought process of a future buyer having those same experiences. The problem would be if they selected that offer, which shows that this is a family who celebrates Christmas, over maybe the agnostic single woman who envisions living in that house just because they love the house. That could be interpreted as a fair housing issue if the love letter, if the person selects that over the other. So with that in mind, what is a love letter? And we talked about that, but what can we do to help protect our clients regarding this? Now, there is becoming a whole big push across the country to make sure love letters are not done. And there's one thing about a love letter that could be interpreted as a fair housing issue. Another thing about a love letter in which, hey, I've always envisioned living in a Victorian home, and your home really fits the market for me. I love that thought process of living in a Victorian home. That doesn't have anything to do with a fair housing violation, because there's nothing connected with a Victorian home and fair housing. But knowing that someone has a passion for Victorian homes and will love that home, that's great. But the problem is with love letters, we could have a problem with fair housing. So there is a push right now in the Oregon legislature. This is a proposed amendment, and I'll show it to you. This is a proposed amendment to House Bill 2550. And what it says here is, notwithstanding the other provision of this chapter, a seller's agent shall redact or withhold any communication other than customary documents in a real estate transaction, including photographs provided by a buyer as necessary to help the seller avoid selecting a buyer based on the buyer's race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, national origin, marital status, or familial status as prohibited by the Fair Housing Act. Now, I have not heard yet that this bill has passed, but it is being debated right now. This was from March 31st of 2021, so less than a month, this proposed amendment is in place. But this is the problem that we are seeing right now. There's also the NAR Fair Housing corner on love letters. Let me go to that one. And again, it's to entice a seller to choose their offer. They write love letters to describe the reasons why. And again, our concern here is we need to advise our client that fair housing laws and the pitfalls of love letters, and inform your clients that you will not deliver buyer love letters. Advise others that no buyer love letters will be accepted as part of the MLS listing. Remind your clients that their decision to accept or reject an offer should be based on an objective criteria. And if your clients insist on drafting a buyer love letter, do not help your client draft or deliver it. Avoid reading any love letter drafted or received by your client, and document all offers received and the seller's objective reason for accepting an offer. Now, this is from NAR Fair Housing. So this is not like a policy, but this is what NAR is suggesting. Now, Jane brought this to my attention. I thought this was amazing. In the California Association of Realtors, they had a statement there in which if people write a love letter into an offer, not only as an attachment to the offer, but actually in the body of the contract. So think about additional provisions. Someone has written an additional provision, a love letter. The other side can say, in agent remarks, seller will not accept love letters, and if the offer has a love letter written into the body of the contract, it will not be presented. I actually ran this by the OAR attorney. Can we refuse to present a love letter to our seller? Can we actually do this? And this is what his response back was. If the seller instructs us, buyer letters that accompany offer will not be presented, and if the letter cannot be separated from the offer, the entire offer shall be returned to the buyer or the buyer's agent. And can we refuse to present a love letter to our seller? We can, if the client requested it, if the buyer did not follow instructions not to send a love letter, and if the reason for not presenting the offer is to avoid fair housing violations. And of course, the buyer has the option to rescind their offer without the love letter language and just write the offer clean. So this is the response I got back from the attorney. Any thoughts about this at all, guys? Because it's an issue. Feel free to unmute your mic and please contribute to this, because I think this is really important for us to discuss this.
Well, it's like, the verbiage that we're seeing now, seller reserves the right to accept an offer at any time, even
Yes.
though, a listing broker will state showings Thursday, Friday, offers in by Sunday at 5, allow us, response time Monday, but however, seller, it reserves the right to accept any time. So
Absolutely.
it's conflicting. Yeah.
Remember, we work on behalf of our sellers or our buyers. We are in an agency relationship. We do as our clients ask us to do. We advise them. We let them know that there are problems if we make a decision based upon an emotional connection to a potential buyer. It's one of those things to be very careful about, because we do not want to have our client or ourselves sued for fair housing violations. It's a serious issue. And people are around the country testing agents. Yeah, just to clarify, Shireen, your question here, can we just speak about the love of the home itself, not to mention things such as family? Our buyers just love your home and are excited about the opportunity to live in it. That's not a violation of fair housing, no. It's just the same things like I love the thought of living in downtown Bend, being close to all the excitement of downtown Bend. There's nothing fair housing violation of that. It's just one of those things. It's a fine line to draw, and we just have to be real careful. Any further questions about love letters?
Linnea?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. This is kind of along the same lines, but it's not an actual letter. So if you have 5 offers and the listing agent says, well, tell me about your buyers. And then the buyer's agent elaborates and they start giving details. Well, they really love the school. They love it's a nice family of 5.
Sherry, I can't hear you real well. Can you talk a little louder or get a little closer to your mic?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
A little bit better.
Okay, let me. I've got it turned up all the way. Can you hear me
Okay.
now?
A little better.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
It's along the same lines of the letter idea, the concept. So the listing agent answers the phone and the buyer says, I've got a great family. It's a verbal versus a written. They have 5 kids. They love the school system, and they really want the house badly. And then the seller asks, well, oh, it's a family? It's a single person. Wouldn't that constitute a violation as well, although it's verbal or not?
Well, it's not a love letter. You're just someone verbally telling you something. Yes, that there's nothing wrong with saying you have a family. Could be anything. A family could be a gay couple. A family could be a multi-generational situation. A family could be a single mom with kids. A family could be, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So I don't think that a family, but we're talking about fair housing. We're talking about familial status. We're talking about, we're talking about ethnicity. We're talking about transgendered scenarios. We're talking about, again, what constitutes fair housing problems. So describing your family in a love letter, it's really tough. But if you look at the Oregon proposed amendment, they're specific about what that is. Again, let me pull it up one more time. So it's selecting a buyer based on the buyer's race, their color, their religion, their sex, their sexual orientation, national origin, marital status, or familial status. Those are the things that are prohibited by fair housing. So if your statement regarding your buyer does not include those issues, there shouldn't be any problem. They love the thought of being able to live downtown. They love the thought of being on the river. They are avid canoeists. Being on the river enables them to go out there and use their canoes. I mean, that's nothing regarding anything that would violate fair housing.
See, I want to say that I 100% disagree with any allowance of that, or being dismissed so that people can't write something about themselves. Because when you have a buyer that's up against 12 other people, you have to provide some sort of background, or I feel like it's important to pull their offer out of others. And it's an emotional sale. So when you can play an emotion card, that's what can oftentimes get you a sale. So to just do this, behind the curtain type of thing, this is offer A, this is offer B, it's taking a lot of the personality out of it. And
Leah,
I think that should be left to the seller to decide, like, yes, I want love letters, that's fine. Or they can reject that. But I don't think it's our place to say that they're basing their decision on a fair housing piece.
That's a really good statement there, Leah. And I totally understand exactly what you're saying. And I have to say, a few years ago, I was always telling our brokers when we had a situation like this, it's like, get an emotional connection between your buyer and the seller. Let them know how much they're going to love the house, how much their kids are going to love being close to school. I mean, all that. Anything we could do to try to make your offer stand out was a good thing. What's happened now is we've gotten so, it's like we've gone 180 the other direction and are so concerned about being in violation of fair housing. If your letter does not violate fair housing, there's nothing wrong with it. If the seller does not make a selection based upon a fair housing issue, there's nothing wrong with it. The concern is that, can they be crossing the line, which is why people are now doing a blanket statement, but I really agree with that. We have a few questions here. Yeah, political affiliation is not a protective class. That's true. And can we say a transaction is like a hero? Being a doctor, being a nurse, being a teacher, that's not a fair housing issue. My client loves the thought process of being able to, who's a nurse at St. Charles, loves the idea of being able to quickly get in their car and get to the hospitals if there's an emergency or whatever. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong. There's nothing connected with a fair housing. Yeah. Any other questions on that, guys? Okay, let's go on to the next thing besides love letters. Escalation clause. Okay, that's something we've been using quite a bit. And basically, when a seller is looking at multiple offers, they have three basic choices every time they're looking at a multiple offer situation. They can, one, take the best existing offer. Two, they can counter one or more of the offers. Or three, they can reject all offers and ask for new offers. So that's really a seller's choice when they're facing multiple offers. And of course, a buyer can modify their offer via an escalation clause. We have used escalation clauses a lot within our brokerage. I've been encouraging them for several years, and we have often won an offer based upon an escalation clause. However, we're seeing more and more in which we have agent remarks in MLS saying no escalation clause, no escalation clauses. So how do we handle that? I have one of our listing agents who told me that whenever they see an escalation clause written in a multiple offer, this is when they're representing a seller, they look at the escalation clause and they see what that buyer is willing to offer, and they come back with a counteroffer and they say, escalation clause is rejected. However, purchase price to be whatever that buyer offered. That's another way of handling it. And so they have seen that that buyer is willing to go up to that price. They come back to that buyer who has the top offer really based upon that escalation clause, gets rid of the escalation clause so they don't have to show what any of the other offers were, and said escalation clause void, therefore, but the purchase price to be this. This has been really successful and very effective for that listing agent, and it's been really impactful. There's also the OAR article on escalation clauses, and here is what they obviously represent. It is the duty of a seller's agent to help the seller get the best price and terms. And again, it means that the seller must know not only of all offers made, but of all offers that can be reasonably anticipated. So sometimes people have the mindset that you have to present all offers in the order in which they come in. That's not necessarily the case. We have an obligation to present all offers on a timely basis. But if we write into our deal and our seller agrees to it, or excuse me, into our listing and our seller agrees to it, all offers will be presented Tuesday at 9 a.m. And so people have until that point in time to get all their offers in. And then Tuesday at 9 a.m. we meet with our seller, sit down, show them all the offers, and they make their choice. It's, of course, as Tina said early on, we're now seeing that people are writing also in that the seller reserves the right to accept an offer prior to that deadline. That's a tricky one that we have to deal with as well. Thoughts on that? Anybody? Anyone have some thoughts about how we're handling this? Have success stories or stories that aren't working well? It's a tough time. It really is to be a buyer's agent. There are so many people competing for those same properties out there. We're often getting outbid. I think being a buyer's agent right now, the best scenario is you go forward and you put your best offer forward. I heard one of our brokers talk to her client over the phone and basically said, she was telling her client, in a multiple offer situation, you want to offer your very best offer so that if you don't get the offer, you don't get the deal, you don't feel regret that you didn't put your best foot forward. And I think that's really a good advice to say to our client. That was an interesting chat there that Sherry was asking here. It's true. I'm starting to see, and that is a side note, I'm starting to see brokerages I've never heard of before getting listings in our market. And I don't know if you guys have seen at all that Zillow is now a brokerage in our market. Their headquarters right now, they're out of Seattle, but they have an agent there is showing out of the Medford area, so they're part of Flex. It's just a matter of time before they're in our market as well. So we'll be competing against Zillow. There's a lot of new business models coming out there, and people is something, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, guys. That's at the end where we're going to talk about the DOJ settlement and what that ramification is for us. And there are definitely people from outside the area who are coming into our market, that's for sure. Okay, multiple offers. Let's go back to our, okay, so it's not this one, it's this one. So there is a spreadsheet that we've developed. It's in our, it's in SkySlope under working docs. In office docs here, I have a spreadsheet. It's an Excel spreadsheet in which you can use this to present your offers when you are the listing agent. You can present on a spreadsheet, taking the pertinent information out there, putting an offer 1, offer 2, offer 3, offer 4, offer 5. If you need more, you can obviously make another copy of this. Show what the initial contract price, what an escalation and the maximum offer would be, earnest money, seller concessions, all the sort of pertinent information that's most important for your seller to review multiple offers. Because when you have 10 offers on a property and you're flipping through page after page after page of paperwork, it's really hard to keep them all straight. If you can summarize them this way so that they can make their decision objectively, and then once they've made their decision objectively, they go back to the offers themselves and sign off on them. And it is helpful. Thank you, Catherine. I'm glad to hear that you find it, this spreadsheet is helpful. I think it's a great tool. If you have questions on that, feel free to keep on interjecting, unmute your mic. Feel free to keep on presenting and let me know what you think about this, because I think use of a spreadsheet really is helpful. If anyone ever questions us also in the future on a fair housing thing, you can say, look, this is how we presented the offers. Our seller made their decision based upon this. Even when it comes to like buyer's last name, you could often say buyer's last name, you could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because sometimes if people would question, you made a decision, you picked Garcia over Smith, or you picked Smith over Garcia, you know, that denotes national or where they're from initially or where their family's from. There could be a potential claim of bias based upon national origin. So this is a really great tool to avoid fair housing problems. What's the spreadsheet called? It is called multiple offer spreadsheet, I believe, Kelly. I will send a copy to everyone after the meeting. So I'll get this out to you guys. It's in Excel. So if you operate on a Mac, I don't know what the equivalent is on Mac, but I can give this what I have to you. Okay, next thing. Okay, the other thing connected with fair housing, or not, excuse me, fair housing multiple offers is people who are complaining, was my offer even presented? Now, that is a major concern with multiple offers. How do I know my offer was even presented? I found out that the deal, that my client didn't get it because all of a sudden I see in MLS it's pending. And that's really terrible. You need to treat all parties professionally. I was talking with one of our brokers who said she called me to tell me that her seller had made a decision, but prior to making it pending, because she wanted the phone to stop ringing, she wanted to make a phone call to all of the people who had offered. And I said, that is phenomenal. You know, letting all parties know, being a professional prior to it going pending is just showing courtesy to all those people who took the time to write an offer. So here is, this is actually from the Oregon Real Estate News Journal from December of 2018. This is from the Administrative Complaint Desk. And the complaint is listing agent didn't present my offer. They didn't even send back a signed rejection by the seller. And here's the question, as a listing agent, must you present every offer, and even if you already have an accepted offer? Of course, we all know that. You've got to present all written offers, written notices, and other written communications to and from the parties involved in a timely manner without regard to whether the property is already party to a contract to purchase. But you also must maintain a written record of the date and time of each written offer or counteroffer delivered and of the seller's or buyer's response. So think about it. When you have an offer that's being presented, there is that line on the last page of the offer, the time in which the offer was presented to the seller. Make sure you fill that out so that we have a written documentation as to when the offer was presented. Now, if the seller rejects the offer or counteroffer, the licensee must provide a true copy to the buyer. But here's another question. What if there was an accepted offer and the seller absolutely won't look at another offer or sign a rejection? And again, that happens sometimes. Our sellers say, I will not look at anything else. I refuse to look at anything else. And you make every attempt. You say, well, we have to do this. But sometimes sellers won't. What we need to do is present the offer, at least by phone, in person, by email. And here's a joke, aerial banner. No, that's funny. Record the date and time of delivery. Use the last page of the sales agreement, a dirty napkin, or even the back of your gas receipt. Keep proof of delivery documentation in your working file and provide a true copy of the response to the buyer. So in other words, if your seller says, I will not, you call them up, you say, I have another offer. They say, I refuse to even look at it. You note that. You give a response back to the other side. I said, I tried. My seller refused to even look at your offer. I am so sorry. He just refused. So you have a written documentation. Make a notation of that by email or text or something that we'd have a record. Any questions on that? Real important to make sure we follow these rules. And again, treat all parties professionally. The way our broker handled that multiple offer scenario, I thought was absolutely perfect. And in this case, followed up by the last page of the offer signed with the seller's rejection. That way we know. Okay. So the next question out of the Principal Broker Forum, and again, so much discussion was handled on the multiple offer scenario. What about a team leader that needs to be a principal broker? So we have situations in which companies have really big teams. One person puts his name on all the listings but doesn't know anything about the transactions. Sometimes there's a lot of complaint that agents have no supervision. Team leaders want credit for every sale, but they're not involved. How can a team leader be named as the broker on the contract but has zero participation in the listing of the sale? And there's confusion when all of a sudden, out of the blue, you're the buyer's agent in this contract and someone you've never heard of calls you up and asks you for information on the transaction. Say they have a transaction coordinator asking you to help facilitate the transaction. And big question here, can you manage a team without being a principal broker? So I don't think we have as much problem with that locally here as we do in other parts of the state. So this is a rule regarding in Oregon about use of the name term or group to advertise. Use of the term does not constitute unlawful use of the trade name. Basically, I believe it's more in the Portland market. We have situations in which a team who is affiliated with a brokerage has all their marketing done in their team and you don't even see the name of the brokerage anywhere. Or the team leader who's telling the team members what to do is not a principal broker. Really, technically, the way the state law is written, if you as a licensed broker are telling another licensed broker what to do, say you are to go open that open house and sit that open house on behalf of my client, you really need to be a principal broker in order to do that. You need to have a principal broker's designation to be telling the other side what to do, or to tell, a team member what to do. The way a lot of people get around that is, as long as there's a designated principal broker in the brokerage who's ultimately responsible for the action of all the members within their brokerage, you're technically following the law, following the rules regarding the real estate agency on management. But I very much doubt that managing principal broker is telling that agent to go sit the open house. So really, if you're going to have a team that is designating different roles for different team members, someone needs to be a principal broker, the person who's telling people what to do on that. And again, it's not an issue here as much as it is in other areas. I really like the way the Sershaw Group handles their team, because what they will do is they'll write an offer, say on behalf of Terry Sershaw, but the offer that's written, after we get into contract, they produce an addendum that says, by the way, you may have this person, this person, this person, and this person, and here's their license numbers, all involved in this transaction. So it's really nice. So we have written documentation, and if we hear from this transaction coordinator who's named, we know that they're part of this group, part of the, they have the right to know what's going on in this transaction. I think it's very well done the way they handle that. Any other thoughts on this? Again, I don't see it as an issue so much here within our market, but it is in other places. Anyone have thoughts? Okay, if not, I'm going to go on to the next. Okay, satellite principal brokers. And again, this is also of concern. I don't think so much in our market as in other places. There are offices, say their headquarters in Portland, who may have a branch office in Medford, or say on the Oregon coast, but the supervisory principal broker is located in Portland. So how can you do that appropriately? How can you do that well? And this topic actually generated a lot of questions, because especially people who live on the coast. Can you supervise brokers in markets outside of your physical location? Say, how can you supervise a coastal brokerage if you don't know about coastal issues? The same thing is true if you're representing a buyer. How can you represent them in a commercial purchase when you don't know anything about commercial real estate? And that all goes back to our article, in our code of ethics, that the services with realtors that we provide to our clients and customers shall conform to the standards of practice and competence which are reasonably expected in the specific real estate disciplines in which they engage. Specifically, residential real estate brokerage, real estate property management, commercial and industrial real estate brokerage, land brokerage, real estate appraisal, real estate counseling, real estate syndication, real estate auction, and international real estate. Realtors should not undertake to provide specialized professional services concerning a type of property or service that is outside their field of competence, unless they engage the assistance of one who is competent on such types of property or service, or unless the facts are fully disclosed to the client. Any persons engaged to provide such assistance shall be so identified to the client, and their contribution to the assignment should be set forth. I mean, I've had one of our brokers a few years ago say, I have a client, long-term client, who wants me to represent them on a farm property. I'm not competent in farm property. I need to be educated on it, but my client insists on my representation. Client knew this. Our broker got educated, but there was nothing in violation here of our article, because our client wanted this representation. Our agent let them know that this is outside their expertise, but we had a very successful transaction just because our broker got fully educated during the course of the transaction. I've had people say, I want to represent someone in a commercial purchase. I say, do you understand commercial? Do you understand all the expertise, all the wherewithal connected with it? And if they say, well, really, I don't, I said, you need to partner with someone who really knows commercial. You will learn through this. This will be an education, but you've got to get clarity on it. And Christy, thank you for this. Christy popped up here with a definition of competent. The ability to do something successfully or efficiently. The players displayed varying degrees of competence. It doesn't say expert. Yes, I agree. Competence. Can you be competent in this? Can you do a good job by this? And how do you learn? unless you actually do something that may be out. The first time you ever wrote a residential purchase agreement, you had to have help. You weren't an expert in this yet. You were someone who was learning, but you had support to be able to do this professionally and do a good job by representing your client. So it's something to think about, making sure that we are working well. I've got people who say they want to represent someone purchasing in Portland. I always ask them, first of all, do you know the Portland market? Can you do a good job by that? And if the answer is yes, by all means, go for it. I think that's great. If you don't, or if you can't service it well, can you partner up with someone locally who could help with opening the doors, maybe for a referral agreement, help you in this transaction? There's ways of dealing with this, yet doing a good job by our client. Okay. So next one here was sellers of new construction without a general contractor's license. Now, this has been my big thing for a long, long time. And this discussion actually generated a lot of eye-opening among the people who are attending this the Principal Broker Forum. And it's also going to lead to a breakout session in the fall conference on dealing with this. Because what happens is we often have people who will buy a parcel of land, and this is, you know, Joe Smith has bought a parcel of land. He hires general contractor to build the house for him with the intent of making money, because he wants to be a spec builder. And sometimes we actually have Oregon brokers do this, people who are flipping homes. And this is real interesting because Oregon licensing to flip home, there's actually a whole article written about this. So if you have every right to buy a home, you have every right to repair your home, you have every right to live in the home. But if a real estate licensee builds a new house, lives in it, then sells it, you're fine with that. If you build it to sell it, or if you buy it to flip it, you need to be a licensed contractor. Truly, if not a contractor, at least a developer. That's the law in this state. So that's for agents. It's true for Joe Smith, who bought that lot with the intent of making money. So the way the Oregon Contractors Board looks at this, it says, a contractor is a person that for compensation or with the intent to sell, arranges or undertakes or offers to undertake or submits a bid to construct, alter, repair, add to, subtract from, improve, inspect, move, wreck, or demolish for another, a building, highway, road, railroad, excavation, or whatever. They need to be a contractor. So it is really, really important that people are aware of this. A person that purchases or owns property and constructs or for compensation arranges for the construction of one or more residential structures or small commercial structures with the intent of selling the structures. Again, the big word is the intent. So you can buy, you can be Joe Smith, who buys a lot, hires a contractor to build a house with the intent that you're going to move into that house. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you have a lifestyle change during the course of that construction and all of a sudden you need to sell that house, there's nothing wrong with that either, according to the Contractors Board. You no longer can afford that house. You've had a death in the family. You have no intent to move on it any longer. The issue here is with the intent to be making money, to be turning a profit. So that's what the Contractors Board looks at. Do you guys have questions on this at all? Because it was a big surprise. In Central Oregon, almost every month I see a new listing hit the market, and I look up who it's new construction, and I look up who is the seller. Well, is that person a licensed contractor? I look them up, they're not. They're not. And so I then talk with our agent. I say, how can we best protect our client? Because the issue comes down to whether or not, if there's an issue with that house and the builder refuses to honor a warranty to that buyer, how is that buyer protected? And there are ways we can make sure that happens. Questions on this at all, guys? Any questions? Anyone have thoughts about it? I mean, I've gone over this quite a bit. This has been my pet thing for a long time. But a lot of those people at the Principal Broker Forum had absolutely no idea. They had no idea whatsoever. They were like, I've never heard this before. So, okay. Here's the DOJ NAR settlement. This is going to be impacting us in the future, near future, I believe. So there was a lawsuit, and there are a lot of lawsuits going on right now. But this was a lawsuit that the outcome of which and the settlement of which is that the MLS's system of longstanding focus on creating an efficient, transparent marketplace for home buyers and sellers, the amount of compensation offered to buyers agents for each MLS listing will be made publicly. So in other words, how it shows in MLS that the buyer's agent to receive 2.5% of the selling price as commission is going to become a public notice. Publicly accessible MLS data feeds will include offers of compensation, and buyers agents will have an affirmative obligation to provide such information to their clients for homes of interest. So relatedly, the rule changes reaffirm that MLSs and brokerages, as always, must provide consumers all properties that fit their criteria, regardless of compensation offered or the name of the listing brokerage. So in other words, your client's looking at a property in which the compensation is 1% versus 2.5%. Obviously, we all know we are to show property regardless of how much we will be paid, but the buyer will become aware of that. While NAR has long encouraged buyers agents to explain how they be paid, typically through offers of cooperative compensation from sellers agents, there will be a rule that more definitively states that buyers agents cannot represent that their services are free to clients. And finally, with the seller's prior approval, a licensed real estate agent will have access to the lockboxes of properties listed on MLS, even if the agent does not subscribe to the MLS. So this is for brokerages that are not members of our local MLS. And there's a couple of them who have operated through Zillow, basically. And they have had their listings show up on Zillow. Now Zillow, because it's now a brokerage, has a separate section for ones that are cooperative from MLS and ones that are listings that are not part of MLS syndication, because they now have to follow the rules of MLS. And this is taking all those listings that are coming in from these other brokers, these other business models, and putting them in a second-class status according to these brokerages. And there's a lawsuit now going on from those brokerages to Zillow. And that's a side note that has not been settled yet. But basically, this notice that the buyers will now see what the buyer's agents is going to be compensated is now something that's going to have to be implemented. And I don't know for sure how that's going to happen or when. The Seattle MLS has had this in place for a couple of years. And I know when it was first implemented, there was a lot of concern that it might be impacting how much compensation is being offered out there. And on the initial rollout, it really didn't have anything, didn't have any impact. I don't know after a couple of years of this how it's impacting the Seattle market. I really don't know. I don't know if any of you guys have heard, but it's going to happen in our market as well. Questions or concerns about that? Any thoughts? Okay, no thoughts or questions? This is another thing that people were concerned about here too. Dual agency risks in our competitive market. So in this case, this example that one of the principal brokers who attended our conference or our Principal Broker Forum said that they had been witnessing a fair amount of risky behavior on the part of listing agents lately. For example, one listing agent recently beat out multiple offers on his own listing with an acceleration clause on behalf of his buyer at $30,000 over list price. This would suggest that he either knowingly priced the listing at $30,000 below fair market value or used his knowledge of the competing offer amounts to give his buyer an unfair advantage. Should listing agents be using them on their own listings when in a disclosed limited agency situation? Anyone have thoughts on that? I'm kind of blown away about the listing agent who did this. If they want to avoid any code of ethics violation charge, to me this is like a very scary scenario. Multiple offers. Here's your buyer, here's your seller. I'm going to use my knowledge. Did they use their knowledge? I don't know. When you are have a buyer who wants to write on your own offer the potential for a code of ethics violation, are you treating all parties fairly? Are you using your inside knowledge to gain an unfair advantage over others? I would have recommended in this scenario that listing agent stay representing his listing and his seller only, and refer the buyer off to someone else for a referral fee. The referral fee could be a significant figure. It could be 50%, it could be 75%. Someone else is just writing up the offer. But representing both parties in a multiple offer situation is really opening yourself up for a potential code of ethics violation. Any thoughts on that, Jane? Do you have a thought about that?
Yes, we had an agent who ran his own brokerage in San Diego back during the recession, when everybody was back in those days writing multiple offers. And 9 times out of 10, an agent from his brokerage always won out. And we could never get it pinpointed on him. And he's since kind of disappeared. But we always suspected that everybody on inside knew, what the other offers were. And I definitely don't think it should be allowed. And I always tell my sellers, if somebody comes to me and wants me to write an offer on your property, I'm going to refer them to another agent in my office. It's too risky.
A lot of people do that. They don't feel good about that. I have other people who say, and personally, I honor people's thoughts on this. If you would rather refer them away, I think that's great. If you feel competent to represent both the buyer and the seller in a dual situation, I have no problem with it. It's the concern when you get to a multiple offer situation in a dual situation. That to me is opening your door up for a lot of problems. Seriously. So I would recommend in that situation, you do definitely refer your buyer away to someone else and take them back, obviously, if they don't win the offer, or after you get through the negotiation to a point of actually having a winner in the bidding war, then maybe you can come back and claim them. But still, it's one of those really scary situations. I would not do it. And Jane, I think a lot of people would have that same thought process. How can they keep on winning over and over and over? Are they sharing inside information? Of course, we could also have a situation here in which our seller has authorized this knowledge to be shared. We don't know. But I do suspect when you see this over and over, you may be right, Jane, but we have no way of knowing. Anyone else have thoughts about this? Okay. This brings us to the topic in which one of our brokers asked, and I really have good feedback from you guys on this, because this is something that's really of concern to our broker here. We have often situations in which agent must be present at all showings. And when you are a listing agent, how do you handle that? Anyone willing to share how they handle that when they're the listing agent and need to be present at showings? The seller has requested them to do this.
Hi, Linnea, this is Tina. I usually just open it up, make sure lights are on, and let them know that I'm there available if they need anything, but I try to stay out of their way, maybe step outside.
That's good. That's good. Any other thoughts? Anyone else have that? When you're,
Yeah, I
yeah,
do.
Diane?
On farm and ranch property, like the Hamby Road that I have in escrow now, I had multiple offers and lots of showings, and all the agents have never shown farm and ranch before. So I told them I will be in the car. So I put on the lights, I opened up the house, and I just sat in the car. And I had so many back-to-back showings that the agent would come to me, and I'd roll down my window with masks on and answer their questions without their client hearing. So I try to assist without making the other agent look ignorant about what they're showing.
That's excellent. That's an excellent way of handling that.
But I'll tell you, on the other side of the coin, when I was 100% farm and ranch for many years, there was another agent that went after the same listings as mine, excuse me, and she would show up and walk on our heels and ask them where they were from and personal questions. And after about a year or two of her doing that, it took me that long to turn around and just tell her to back off. And so that particular agent with the initials PM, she now knows when I have a buyer that she's to wait on the front porch. And so now we have our rules set.
So she's honoring your request, which is good.
Yeah. But she has stolen my clients in the past on farm and ranch just by asking them, by being on the tour with us, on our heels, saying, where are you from? What are your names? And then once they've purchased the place, she's written them letters, if you ever sell, here I am. So it can get nasty. So that's why I think if you want to be present, just don't be sleazy, be present and be respectful.
Okay.
Lynette?
Yeah. Yeah, Sherry, do you have something here?
Yes, I redirect any questions. So if I'm present and the agent's there, and I watch their body language, because I think a lot of agents don't want someone else to start talking to their clients directly and engaging with them in depth, right? So if they have questions, I say, well, you have a buyer's agent, and I'm sure if they have any further questions, they can ask me. I'd be happy to, because they're the intermediary, and I'll channel it through them, and then so if they start asking me directing questions to me, I will turn it back to their agent. Say, oh, that's the expert.
That's good, Sherry. Yeah, I know. I've listened to Sherry Ortega a number of times. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Sherry, but I know that you always tell people, I'm here to answer questions. If you want a tour, I'll give you the tour. If you don't, I'll just stand over here or I'll go away. Sherry, would you mind sharing that?
I have two sisters that are in real estate, one in Santa Barbara, one in Maui, and none of us use lock boxes. And, particularly, because some brokers are put off by it. Why do you always have to be present for your listings? Well, number one, the seller pays the commission, and that's the least they can expect from their listing broker. That you open the house, turn the lights on. I have an unbranded amenity list that includes everything room by room. If you'd like a tour, I'm happy to walk you through the house. If not, I step outside, and it's that simple. I lock up the house, make sure the lights are off, and that's all it is. And I've been lucky so far that I have been able to, schedule my appointments so that I am present, and that's it.
See, that's wonderful. You're honoring what your seller wants you to do. You're setting yourself as a special agent who will show the property. And then whatever the buyer's agent needs, you're there to give them a tour if they want, or you'll step aside and stay out of everything. It's really, I think that's absolutely the right answer of how to handle this. And it sounds like Diane has the same situation. She's there to answer questions, but not to interfere.
Not at all. No. And, I have got, been up against, competing brokers, and, not always do I get the listing, but it does set you apart. when your seller knows that you have a vested interest and you're going to answer all those questions. The buyer's not going to leave having questions, but I don't ever follow the showing broker through the house, and I just try to be as accommodating as I can. So for what it's worth, I'm just Sherry Ortega. I'm not a team or anything. So sometimes it is challenging. It's hard, but I think it's necessary. And, so I think sellers do appreciate it.
Well, they do. And I think buyer's agents would too. It's so easy at that point. Say you're walking through the house with your buyer and they have a question regarding, I don't know, the irrigation of the backyard. How does that work? The agent could come to you and say, could you tell me, what do you know about this? Can you help me answer this question? You're right there. You can answer it at that point in time. Yes, and Christy, I appreciate what you had to say there too about meet and greet upon arrival, offer to walk with them to answer questions, or let them go by themselves. And respectful, no questions on that. How do you handle it when you're representing the buyer? And it sounds to me like Diane had a good answer to that. She came to a mutual respect, or a mutual, maybe not necessarily respect, but a mutual agreement about how to handle a pushy list agent here. But what do you do when you have a listing agent who will not get the hint, who will not leave, who is nothing but pushy and tries really hard to butt in on everything that you're doing? How do you guys handle that?
Linnea, I cut the showing short because the agent followed us out to the car, and she wouldn't back off. She kept talking to them and trying to get some information, cozying up where, I don't know, it was very awkward and uncomfortable. So we headed to the next house.
Yeah, so you get the impression that they're trying to really butt in. Is it just incompetence, or is it you get the impression they're trying to really get to know your clients with the idea of taking your clients?
It was a variety of things. We get into the personality. Some part arrogance. They felt they knew better than the typical, the agent. They were trying to engage them and really sell the home. They felt they could maybe do a better job, better job. Maybe somewhat solicitation. I don't know. And the one of them literally stepped on my back and my heel. That was the like, okay.
Stepped on your heel? Oh, God. Oh, that's terrible.
Well, it was a puppy dog type of thing. She was following me, and then I had to just turn around, like one of the agents just mentioned, and say, "Hey, give them space. It's okay. They're going to decide. Let them breathe a bit. Let you and let's go outside and talk or something.
Okay.
How to do that because the person wouldn't let up.
Yeah.
They were very adamant, persistent, and
And you want to be professional, but you also need to say, I need space with my clients. Please back off.
They come back to the house because they were so distracted. They didn't get their measurements. They didn't get a complete tour. The person was boasting and talking about themselves, but that's okay.
That's not good. Yeah, and I know Diane, both you and Jane had your mics unmuted for a second there. Diane first, then Jane.
Oh,
No.
never mind. Diane first and then Jane. So there's a listing in Tetherow Crossing right now. It's a beautiful home on a rim. And 3 years ago, the agent was pushy and the seller was present and pushy. And the two of them followed us from room to room. So by the third room, I finally turned around and said, we like to talk, my clients and I, as we go through a home together. So we would like a little bit of privacy. And they both more or less said, tough, we're going to join you. So 3/4 of the house was done. And she was saying it was riverfront property and it was not. So I said, okay, you've hindered this by being present, Mrs. Seller. I said, to be honest with you, if you weren't here, it would show better and my clients can remember what we're looking at. But when you talk to them through each room, they can't record what they're visually seeing. And on top of that, you have this home book saying it's riverfront property in your MLS listing when it's not. That's BLM land beneath you, and then it's the river. Well, she wouldn't change the listing to state that. And so now 3 years later, it's back on the market and it's no longer listed as riverfront. So it's taken that seller 3 years to listen, but she had a realtor who was like a puppy dog doing what she wanted to do and thus lost the listing and never sold the property. So I think it hinders both of them when they're pushy. And if they don't back off 15 or 20 minutes into the tour, I think it's time to tell them, you're not helping things. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Diane. Yeah, and Jane, did you have something there?
No, I think I just second those. I don't like pushy agents. They make me back off.
Yeah.
If they get too in your face or whatever, then I'm not a confrontational person. So I'm just like, okay, I'm gone. Basically.
Yeah. And what Diane had to say, it's really hard when you have a seller who's dictating that they're present. They're the ones who are leading tours, and why would they bother to hire an agent to begin with if that's their mindset? I don't get that. That's tough. That's really, really tough.
Hey, Linnea, this is Julie.
Yeah, Julie.
I was also wondering, I don't know what you guys have run into as far as this goes, but one of my friends recently sold her house, but they actually have cameras around their house, kind of like the Ring doorbell, but inside, but it also has a microphone. And they were actually able to listen in on everybody who showed the house. And I know that's supposed to be disclosed, but I'm sure there's things that get overlooked, or maybe it wasn't disclosed to people because she did hear everything they said. So I don't know if that's something that we could just warn people about. Like, I don't know if this place does have cameras. It'd be better to discuss anything you want to ask outside of the property.
Yeah, that we've talked about that before, and we should always make assumptions that people are listening to us. In some states, you don't have to disclose that. In our MLS, we're supposed to disclose if there's recording equipment there, but I don't know if people are being honest. But especially if you're at a point of, this is the house we want, let's start talking about price. You as the buyer's agent should say, if you're interested in this property, let's go outside of this property. Let's come back to the office and talk about our negotiating ideas. But you just have to make assumptions that they're recording you, and do not, and advise your clients when you're going through a house. Let's talk about, do you think this room works? What do you like about this area? What do you like about this? But don't show over enthusiasm. Of course, all that idea is thrown out the window right now in this strong seller's market, because obviously they're going to have a lot of offers on property. But in a more balanced market, you don't want to tip the hat and hurt your negotiating skills by expressing your offer, what you're going to do in the property that you're offering, just with the idea that someone could be recording you. Absolutely. Any other thoughts, guys? Okay. Anyone else with haves or wants? Anything else, haves or wants?
I'm looking for a recommendation for a hardwood flooring installer. So if anyone knows of someone, if you could send the contact for me, I'd appreciate it.
Thanks, Sherry. I might have somebody. Anything else? We have a bunch of new listings hitting the market, which I'm super excited about, because listings are key right now. I don't know if you guys heard that Robert has one coming in, I think today or tomorrow. Just one active, Emily just told me, in Monterey Pines. So that's a nice area. And I know we have about, I don't know, how many more, Emily, do we have? She has 8 no other listings say incomplete, ready to hit the market just as soon as the brokers tell us their clients are ready for it. So we have a bunch of things happening. I'm starting to see more markets, more active listings in MLS altogether, which is great. We need that so badly. Any other things? Haves or wants? Questions? Yeah, Jane?
Yeah, I sent out an email this morning on my short-term rental to everybody. We'll be going live next Wednesday. And then there'll be another email this afternoon on a 3-2 up in Boyd Acres. It's almost 1,600 square feet. And that'll be going on next week also in the very low 4s. We've got tenants in place, and it is rather cluttered because there's several children in the property, but otherwise it's in, you know, really good condition. And we've got them on a month-to-month. We got talked them out of their annual lease, and so they're on a month-to-month, and understand if an owner-occupier wants to move in, then they'll get their 90-day notice.
Great, thanks, Jane. That's really exciting. Listings are key. Anything else, anyone? Okay, if not, I will be following up and I will send the Excel doc of the multiple offer sheet, and I will send that along with the recap of this meeting as soon as I get the recording back. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. And thanks so much, everyone.